want you to take out a sheet of paper or a blank piece on the iPad or something like that. And we're going to go do some drills of terms that I want you to know that are on the list. So make sure you have this term list with you. Anything that I teach you in this section is on this term list. So if you label the pictures, you don't have to label more than what's on the list. And you only need to label that term one time. That's totally fine. All right, so I know sometimes the lines have a little more to it, but I don't want to overwhelm us. You know, at first it's like, oh, I can more terms. That's great. But by the time we get to the arm muscle, it's a lot of terms already. So I'd rather have you build on that, and then next semester you can build more on deeper levels of terminology. Because it can be overwhelming. We don't have to have it overwhelming. So, all right. So the first term I want you to know is number one. Write it down. Don't say it. This is our drill. Number one. I want you to tell me what is the landmark between the eyebrows. What is the landmark between the eyebrows called? Landmark between the eyebrows. That's number one. And number two, I like you to tell me the bone that makes up the sides of the top of the skull. What are these two bones called? These two bones that make up the sides of the skull. What are they called? That's number two. And number three, we're going to open the skull up. We're going a little deeper now. Last week we did all these terms. So number three, I want you to tell me, well, this is the front, so the front's right here. This is the back, front and back. What is this indentation here called in the bone? That's number three. It's where the pituitary gland sits in. It's a funny name, this indentation here. What is that indentation called? That's number three. And then number four, when I look at the lower jawbone, I have a piece of bone here that goes into the temporal bone. It makes a connection, makes a joint. What is that landmark called? The part of the lower jawbone that makes a joint with the temporal bone right here. What is that joint making process called? That's number four, right? Good. Very good. And let's go to some facial muscles. Number five. I'm going to want you to tell me the muscle that's on the outside of the jaw, going up and down, right here, up and down the lower jawbone, and it's a muscle of chewing. It's a muscle of mastication, so it helps you close the jaw to chew. What's that muscle called? And then number six, right? We're going to do another muscle. It's a round muscle, and it goes around the eye. What's the round muscle that goes around the eye? That's number six, the round muscle that goes around the eye. That's number six. Six. And number seven, the last one of those, there's a muscle, there's a few muscles in the corner of the mouth. One that pulls the corner of the mouth down, one that pulls the corner of the mouth up, and one that pulls the corner of the mouth sideways. I want you to tell me the one that pulls the corner of the mouth downward. Downward. The corner of the mouth muscle goes down. What is that called? Very good. Very good. So that's what we did last week. So then this week, we're going to talk about vertebrae and ribs, and arms and legs, right? So we're gonna start with some vertebra stuff. So we got these bones on the table. These are all the different types of vertebra we get. So if you take that, and what I do is I take the biggest one out, and I hold it on the biggest piece of the biggest one, and I want you to tell me what is that part of a vertebra called? That big piece here. What is that part of a vertebra called? I think that's number 7, right? Or 8? 8. I'm sorry, I'm a little dyslexic with that stuff. But on a vertebra, what's that big piece called? The biggest part. The whole thing. What is that called? So that's number 8. And then number 9, when I take the whole spine, this is the head, this is the whole spine, neck, mid-back, this is where the ribs come out, low back, and at the bottom, right by the butt here, there is a big bone. We have it on the table as one of those. Sits right in here. What is that whole bone called? What is that whole bone called? That's number 9. A whole bone. What is that called? My favorite bone. You know it's on the test. It's a very, very sacred bone. So that's number 9. God, I love these bones. It's really cool. So then anyway, that's number 10. We take the hip bone. And the hip has a few parts to it that we want to know. First, we have this crest, the iliac crest. That's sort of where the baby can sit on when we have a baby or we carry something really heavy. Right now, my dog is growing a lot, so I have him sitting on that thing. But when we take that crest and we go all the way to the back, we get to this big bump back here. It's right here, that big bump. What is that big bump called? It's a terminal edge. It's a long 4-letter word, 4-letter term, 4-word term, sorry, 4-word term. The big bump in the back of the pelvis. The big bump in the back of the butt is actually what I call it. The big bump in the back of the butt. I know I'm getting you a lot of detail already. But that's okay. That's a pre-drill. If you don't get those, that's cool. We're going to talk about them. But we're going to set the stage a little bit. And since it was last week, some of the terms you probably know. So then, when we get to the lower extremities, I forgot the upper extremity, if you do those afterwards, we sort of see this is how that thing sits into that's sort of the pelvis, 1/2 of this pelvis here, right there. And so when I look at the femur, I got a few parts to the femur. I got this round thing on top that's really nice and round. What is that called? Is that number 10 or 11? 11. What's that round thing called? That's number 11. That round thing on top of the thigh bone, on top of the femur. And then, number 12, we got a big bump on the outside. What's that called? Big bump on the outside of the femur. What's that called? So that's good. I know. If you don't get those, that's all right. We're going to talk about them afterwards. But some you might get. And then look at that. I'm going to hold an arm like that. So there's a shoulder blade, there's a collarbone, and then there's the humerus and the forearm bones. Now the forearm, number 13, I got 2 bones in the forearm. One that goes to the thumb, that's on the outside here, and one that goes to the pinky, that's on the inside. Can you tell me those 2 bones? What are those 2 bones called? That's number 13, right? Good. We're going to leave it at that. 13. All right. Now let's solve that thing. You have to help me because I forgot what they all are. Number 1, you just shouted out now. Number 1, what was number 1? Glabella. Very good. Number 2? Parietal? Parietal bones on the sides. Good. Number 3? Sella turcica. Very good. Number 4, I think was this, right? Yeah, what's that called?
The
Mandibular condyle. Very good. A condyle, you see the word condyle, you think joint. Condyle joint. It's like a bump, a sort of a widening. See how it's narrow here and then it widens on top? That's where it makes the joint. So that's why I call it a condyle. And then that's number 4, right? And then what was number 5? Masseter. The muscle here is a masseter muscle. And then number 6, I think, is the round one around the eye.
Sorry, what was number 5?
Orbicularis oculi, very good. And then number 7 is the angle of the mouth pulling down. What was that called?
Depressor anguli oris.
Very good. Depressor anguli oris. God, you guys are good. And then I think we move to the vertebra. Is that right? Or we have one more? Vertebra, right? What's the big thing on the vertebra called?
Body.
The body of the vertebra. Big thing? Good guess, body. Round thing? Did we get to the round thing yet? No, not quite. We're going to first get to the pelvis, right? We talked about the big bump on the back of the pelvis. What was that called? Oh, that's one. We jumped one, right? We jumped one. We had this one. What was that called?
Sacrum.
The sacrum. The sacrum bone. When the Greeks took it out of animals, they used it as a plate to burn sacred stuff. So they call it the sacrum bone, the sacrum. That's why I love that bone so much. And if you have back pain and somebody works this back part of your sacrum, it feels so good. Anyway, that was that. And then the next one, what number was that? So now 11? What's the bump on the back of the butt?
No, that was 10.
Okay, 10, sorry, I'm fall off. But what was that one called?
Posterior superior iliac spine.
Posterior superior iliac spine. Very good. All right, and now we move to the femur, right? Good. Thank you for helping. If it's more than 5, I can't remember it. What's this round thing called on the femur?
The head.
Femur head.
That femoral head, or head of the femur. Anything round like that, you're thinking it's called a head. Just generally, that's what we do. We have one here, we have one here, we have a whole bunch of them.
So it is head of femur.
Head of femur, correct. And then I think I did the big bump on the outside, right?
Mhm.
What was that called?
Greater trochanter.
The greater trochanter. Very well. Very good. Okay. And I think what else do we do? The forearm bones?
Yeah.
Was that it? And what are those called? The one going to the thumb,
The ulna
Radius. and the one going to the pinky is the ulna. Very good. Radius and ulna. Good job, you guys. How was that? You seem like you're getting it. That's all good. So let's go through the terms on the list. So I'm going to just go through the terms on the list. We talk about them, and then I want you to be in the lab and go through them with each other and talk about them, and I come around and we'll talk together about them, and then we'll do another drill at the end, and then we'll go home. We want to be out of here by 8. So don't let me talk too long. That's usually my challenge. So anyway. All right, let's see. Uh-oh. Why can't I have this the way I want it? There we go. Okay, when we get to the vertebra, the terms that we want to know about the vertebra are, here we have a vertebra. When we look at the whole vertebral column, it's the stuff that stacks on top that forms the spine, right? So each of these bones is one of these kind of bones. So they all look a little bit different. This is the lower one, the big one, and this is the one in the mid-back. You see how these go down and along. And then we got the smaller ones in the neck. And then on top, we got like this weird ring that looks like a ring kind of thing. That's on top here. So they're a little bit goofy. But for the most part, they all have similar structures to them. So they all have a vertebral body. That's the big part. That's anterior, so the body's to the front. And then if you go all the way to the back, we have this bump that sticks out that you can touch in the back, and that's known as the spinous process. So that's what you feel when you push on it. And then in between, we have a few terms that I want you to know. Essentially, those are the terms that make up this hole here. And this hole here is known as the vertebral arch. Because when you go up and down the whole spine, you go up and down the whole spine through this hole, and that's where we have the spinal cord. And the spinal cord is nerve, and nerve needs to be very well protected. So, because it's very soft, it's very delicate, and so what we do is we encase that in bone. That usually happens. And so we have the body, and from the body backwards, here it goes up, but it's really going back. We have these two pillar things, and we call them the pedicles, right? The pedicles. And then they go to the outside a little bit, and there they connect with a piece that goes to the further laterally, and that's known as the transverse process. You have that there too. Something like that, you think in muscle attachment. There's a bunch of small muscles that attach to here that help stabilize the spine. There's muscles that attach to like the transverse, and then a few segments down or above, they attach to the spinous, and they hold the spine together like that. The other thing on the transverse process you see is this shallow depression here, and that's a generic vertebra, but that's resembling the rib, where the rib comes in. So the rib comes in from, like, if I'm like this is the vertebra, right? This is the back, this is the front. The rib comes from the front to the back. It comes around here and anchors, attaches to the vertebra on the transverse, and then on the body right here. So the rib is pretty interesting that way. If you look, the rib, you have a rib on your table somewhere. Where is the rib? Is there a rib here? Can I have a rib real quick? Thank you. If you look at the rib here, you see it has a few different bumps. Let's just go to that rib real quick. It's got a few different bumps. It's got a head, it's a main bump on top, and then it's got a narrow thing, and then you got a bump. Right? The head, neck, and the tubercle. So we got a head, a rib head. The narrower part underneath the head is usually called the neck. So it's also called the neck here. And then we got a bump here that's known as the tubercle. That bump is where we attach the vertebra to the transverse process, and this is where we attach the vertebra to the body of the spine. So let's go back to that vertebra. So the rib sort of sits into that vertebra like that. It attaches here with the tubercle, and then the body attaches to here. And so the reason why I'm telling you that is the ribs. When somebody has like sleeps wrong or something like that, they wake up with a knife stabbing pain, like somebody wants to put a knife in the back, it's usually a good pain. It's one of those joints that like can't work right because they're so small and so many, and every joint has a skin around it that holds all the fluid in and everything together. And if that gets pinched, that hurts like somebody stepping on your foot. And that's that kind of pain that we feel. So that's where the ribs come in. So anyway, back to the vertebra. So we have that transverse process to the side, and then we reach back towards the spinous process, and we call that bar of bone the lamina on both sides. So there's the lamina. So that's pretty much the generic vertebra, the pieces that I really want you to know about the vertebrae is in general. Then we have a few things that are different between the cervical, the thoracic here, and then the lumbar. And this picture is probably also helpful because we see two vertebrae stacked on top of one another. That's the view from the back. And you can see how there is a disc that is in between the vertebrae. So when somebody says, I have a herniated disc, that's what they're talking about. And it's sort of a pillow, but it's not really. It's like the outside of the disc is attached to the vertebra above and below. And the inside of the disc is sort of a motor oil type gel structure that is sort of viscousy, a little stiff in the morning. And when we sit a long time in a car, we got to move it and slowly mobilize it again. So that's the inside. That can be a lot of pain if that inside is really cold and not moved, and all of a sudden you move swiftly. It can create pain. In German, they call that a witch's shot. Medical term, Hexenschuss. Very funny. I mean, it's not funny when it happened. It happened to me a few times. You can't move afterwards, but the turn is kind of funny. And then the other thing where we have joints between vertebrae is in the back, where we have on each side, we have a joint that gets created between the vertebra above and the vertebra below. And you see that here, these joints right in here, these right in here, these are these spinal joints that we have one on each side. I'm not making you study and learn the terms of these articular processes and the sets and things like that, because it's a little complicated, which part is what, when I ask on a test or when you try to figure it out. Just know about this construction, how it's made. It's kind of interesting because you got the front that has the disc that has about 2/3 of the weight going down, and the back joints is about 1/3 that they carry in the back. And so when you have, let's say you have low back pain, they actually often differentiate between is your problem in an intervertebral disc, or you're getting older and this gets dehydrated and less flexible and all that kind of stuff, or do we have something in the back where we have arthritis and we have hypertrophy? Hyper means more, trophy means create more bone, kind of more things. So we can have hypertrophy here, and these joints become arthritic. So that doesn't move so well. So people get a little grouchy with that. So sometimes then they can put injections into here to decrease that pain. And I, as a chiro and massage person, I go for the movement of the bones and see how that works. All right, so that's the vertebra generally, and then the top vertebra, the first vertebra, is this round thing that's known as the atlas. And that's right between the skull and then the spine. That's the first vertebra. And then the second vertebra is known as the, and this is all twisted. The second vertebra is known as the axis. And you can notice that because it's got this thing sticking up. And that thing sticking up is called the dens. And so actually, originally, that thing sticking up was sort of the piece missing where the vertebra is just a round vertebra. So it's like the body was kind of that thing, and at some point in evolution it detached and became its own part of the bone. And so that's your atlas, and then your axis, and then your dens. And so we already briefly talked about the sacrum as in the lower, we mentioned it on the quiz. So if you take the spine down, all the way down, we got the thoracic vertebra, the lumbar vertebra, and at the bottom, we got fused vertebrae. And that's the sacrum, the sacral bone. It's going to be on the test. I love that one. If I, when I do the test, then afterwards I look who watched the videos, because the ones who watch the videos or were in class, they always get those right, but not everybody else. Anyway, that bone is fused vertebrae at the bottom. And it sort of then creates that in between point between the spine, the weight coming down, and then the hip, the weight getting distributed to the hip, the pelvis on each side, and then it goes down to the legs into the foot. So this is a very crucial place of weight distribution. So clinically, this is to me one of the most important parts that I always work on everybody. If this is not level, everything else is having issues. It's sort of it's like the foot. If you have one foot that's flat and you walk crooked all the time, it's going to be a problem. The whole spine is going to be a problem. The whole body is going to be a problem. You're going to look at that. But this is one of the crucial parts. So when we look at the sacrum, we got a few pieces. We got a base. The base is the top. It's like an inverted triangle. So the base is the top. And the apex is the bottom part of it, where it comes together. So that's the bottom part of it. And then I make you study a couple of lines and things. I make you study these lines here, these transverse lines or ridges. Those are fused vertebrae. So those are the fused vertebrae that come together. You can see how that looks like it could be a vertebra in between some bones. And then so that's the front here, the ridges. And when we turn it backwards from the back, we have the remnants of these spinous processes, these bumps we can feel in the back of the spine, and that's collectively known as the median sacral crest. median sacral crest. We thought we were done. We did the ribs already. Now all we're going to do on this here is on the second column is the sternum. And the sternum is the breastbone in the front. So the ribs come from the back. The ribs come from the back to the front. And then they anchor into the breastbone. Now we got some ribs that come directly, well, they actually have a cartilage, but they come directly with the bone to the cartilage, then to the breastbone. Those are known as the true ribs. They come directly in. Then, further down here, we got some ribs that actually, see this cartilage here goes straight into the bone. This one too, last one goes straight into the bone. But then the other ones, they go into that cartilage. They don't go straight into the bone. So those are known as false ribs. That's the differentiation. So the ones that go straight, I think I have a picture, let me see. Oh look, I have a picture of that. Haha. So the ones that go straight in, right here, see this one too, they still go straight in like that. That's number 7. Then the one below here, the cartilage feeds into this cartilage, so it doesn't go straight to the breastbone. I know, that's how picky they are with these things. And then at the bottom, you got 2 that are not even going anywhere. They're floaters. They're free floating. Look at that. They're like floating right here. They don't go anywhere. So you better never massage anybody like that and go like that and poke them really hard because you poked the rib. I had a patient, God bless her soul, she called a few years back and she was old. She was in her 80s. She was from New York when the beatnik era was. So that's a 50. So yeah, she went around. And she had, the poor lady, she was so cool. She had scoliosis. She had an original 69 Camaro as an 80-year-old lady in Berkeley. So that was really cool. But she walked in one time and she couldn't walk and it hurt so bad. And her scoliosis is a side bending of an S shape in the back. When you look at the back, it's not straight up and down. Her spine was bent so bad towards the side that one of those lowest ribs will catch the bone down here. And so when we pushed it down, I have a drop table. It goes ba-dong, ba-dong, ba-dong. It's like an earthquake method. Like I push the bone down and the table goes down and it stops and then a mold pushes a little bit. We were able to make room and she was able to be okay for a couple of weeks. But it was like that physical. You know, like that didn't need a shot, but it needed some thinking of what the anatomy is doing. And that's often we forget that. That's one reason why I'm explaining to you guys early on in your education of this stuff, those pieces, those connections, because they're not that complicated. Very often it's really right on the tip. One of my latest patients, she come in and she's like, I felt so bad because she got a referral 6 months before and she couldn't reach me somehow. I'm really hard to reach. She came in and she's like, my hip is really off. I'm like, okay, then let's work on that hip. So we slowly worked on the hip, and it was really not good. And she had an MRI, she had lots of disc problems. But guess what helped her the most? When we gently made the hip level so she wasn't walking around crooked and everything else hurt more. And so then slowly she could, and now she's in PT. But it's very physical. And the patient walked in, do you know what they want, what's going on? She walked into the doctor like didn't even want to give her an x-ray first. It was crazy. And I mean, he was ignorant. Most doctors are told fine, but once in a while you got to fight for what you need. That's, you know, and that's okay. It's okay me telling you that. Sometimes you got to fight for what you need. You got to ask the doctors the question. I want them to ask me the questions. That keeps our faculty going. If you guys ask questions to the doctors, that keeps us thinking, and not just like, oh yeah, here, have an aspirin. Everything is an aspirin, because it's not. And my daughter, Adam, MD, she came Saturday, she saw 24 patients on Friday. Can you imagine about 24 winos coming in your office? Oh, my back hurts, I want you to help me now. Can you imagine the empathy deficit this person has after the end of the day? It's crazy. Empathy deficit? You go home and then your husband wants something from you? Like, oh my Lord. Or your wife, I guess. You know, I don't know. I mean, anyway, that's... You know, she was at the office. What'd she say? She got there at 7 at 8 o'clock. She was still writing reports. Most of us go like, I'm not doing that. Oh, I'd love to be an MD. They make a lot of money. No, they work really hard. Yeah, maybe they make money, but they work really hard. All right, let's go to the upper body real quick here, and then to the lower body. Any questions to what I was just haranguing at you? When you look at the arm, when we look at the first part of the arm, the shoulder blade, the big thing there is that ridge in the back. So when you reach back in your own shoulder, you can feel that thing. There's a ridge back here. You can feel that. And that ridge is known as the spine or the scapula. The spine of the scapula. The ridge of the shoulder blade. Right here. The ridge of the shoulder blade. And that's the spine right here. Spine of the scapula right here. If you go all the way to the end of the shoulder, the tip of the shoulder, right here, or right here, that's known as the acromion process. The acromion process. That's the tip of the shoulder. That's right here. Tip of the shoulder. So spine and then a tip where it gets wide, flat and wide. See, it looks a little weird on the picture. In reality, it's like flat this way. And that's the acromion. And then in the front, from there, you get the clavicle going forward. And what the clavicle really does, it pulls the shoulder blade back. It holds it in place. That's really the main job of the clavicle. And so then the next term in the scapula is we got these two places. We got a place above the spine of the shoulder, the spine of the scapula, right here. And we got a part below it, right here. So if you touch your own self here, go reach back, that's the spine, that ridge. Above it is that supraspinous fossa, and below it is that infraspinous fossa. So if you know the spine, you know all the other terms. You just slow everything down and look at the terminology. Don't just memorize the word. Look at supraspinous fossa. Supra is above. Spine is referring to the spine. Fossa refers to an indentation. And that's where we have muscles. When we then go further, we turn the shoulder blade around and we go underneath, right in here, underneath, right in here, underneath. That's the subscapular fossa, right here. Subscapular fossa. So those are very important three areas because they all have muscles to them. We got a supraspinatus, an infraspinatus, and a subscapularis. Where are they? You see the three of them here. You see that. You see one here, you see one here, you see one here. Those are muscles, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and then a small one is called the teres minor. We'll talk about that. That's just a different, that's a cross one. But then underneath here, we got this green one. You see, that's the rib cage. That's underneath. That's the subscapularis. That's another muscle. So if you know those areas, you will know those muscles. And they are very important. They are the ones who hold the arm into the shoulder blade. Then another term we want to know is we did the acromion. Then we have on the outside, when we look from the outside inward into the shoulder blade, we see this shallow depression here. It's almost like not that much bone, but it's known as the glenoid cavity because that's where the humerus comes in. Like see here, the humerus, that way. The humerus goes in here. Around this area we have cartilage that sort of holds it in like that. But the arm is flexible and can move a lot, much more than a head can move. And so you need flexibility, so the joint itself is very shallow. And the rest is cartilage that can bend a little bit. But this is when somebody complains of a labrum tear. They overstretch their arm or something and they tore this cartilage out of you. That's the labrum. You get that in receivers in football. They tear that stuff. And then the last term on the shoulder blade is, if we turn it upside down, from the front. If you look here, we have this big, weird bump sticking out right in front here. On us, it's like right next to the thing, you got this bump, it's like this little bump here. It hurts when you press hard. And that thing it's right here. And that's known as the coracoid process. And it's going to be a muscle attachment that has muscles going to the chest and also to the arm. So it's got a few muscles, some muscle attachment. And I visualize that, and I always remember that, like it's kind of not really politically correct. But a Reagan on top of the witch called coracoid, and that's that one that I remember. Because it's like the name is so weird. Why would he come up with that kind of name? It's like a chromium. But at least in a chromium, we know AC separation injuries, right, from sports. The AC joint is right here. Those injuries. If you play football, you probably know about those injuries. All right, so that's the shoulder blade. That's any questions to that thing? No, good. Well, then let's go right back down the humerus. Not too much stuff on the humerus. Guess what this round thing is called? The head. What's below the head? A neck. So we got a neck that's right around below the head. And on this one, we also have a second neck. That's where the bone is skinny, right here. Why isn't that should have a round thing going around? Something like that. So this part here is known as the surgical neck. This part here is known as the anatomical neck. So the anatomical neck is much wider and it doesn't break surgically, injury-wise. And the surgical neck is where we have to do surgery because that part is narrow, so that breaks. If the arm breaks up there, it breaks there. Most likely. So that's why we have two necks in the arm. A little bit different. And then when we go further down, we can just go to that one too. So when we go further down on the arm, we have on the outside, we got this rough part here. And that rough part is known as the deltoid tuberosity. Because you got this muscle known as the deltoid that comes down here, holds the arm like that, and pulls it up and forward a little and backward. That's known as the deltoid. And the deltoid starts around in the clavicle, goes around the spine, and then anchors into this deltoid tuberosity to pull the arm up like that. So it's kind of weird because it's just a little rough, and you think like, yeah, it's just not smooth. It's called a tuberosity because it's a muscle attachment. So anywhere where the bone is a little rough, or it sticks out, or has a bump, you think muscle. Generally muscle. Sometimes joint, but generally muscle. All right, then we're gonna have a couple bumps I need to talk about. On top here, we got two bumps. We got one here, right here, on the outside, and then we got one right in the front. The one a little more on the outside is a little bigger, so that's known as a greater tubercle. And the one that's a little smaller next is known as the lesser tubercle. And in between, we got this, valley, and they call that the intertubercular groove, sulcus, or sometimes they call it the groove, intertubercular groove. And this is, I remember when we did Zoom this morning. When I first went to massage school, the teacher was like talking about this intertubercular groove, and I'm like, groove, that's music. A beat. And I still got my hand, it was like 30 people. I'm like, excuse me, I don't know, my English probably wasn't at all anywhere. And I say, the groove, isn't the groove part of music? And she's like, no, it has more and more meaning. So I learned English that way. So if you feel like silly sometimes asking weird questions, don't feel silly. Just remember, it doesn't matter. You just all want to learn that terminology and figure out what it means. All right, so that was how I learned about that. And in here we have the biceps, this muscle here that has a tendon that goes through here. And sometimes it can split out, and that can cause a lot of pain. So then this comes into play clinically, this groove thing. So that's why we learned that. When we go then further down, we have a few more terms. We have a medial and a lateral epicondyle. I don't know why these labels are a little off. But anyway, you're taking that arm in your hand. The medial epicondyle is this bone that sticks out here at the distal humerus by the elbow. If you feel yourself, it's right here. It sticks out. It hurts if you bang it. It's the funny bone. See the bone here? That's kind of bony. That's right here. And the reason why I want you to know this one, because a lot of the muscles that go to the forearm are attached in this bone on the medial epicondyle. And then on the outside, we got another one. Oh, it's not indicated. We got this one here. That bump here, that's the lateral epicondyle. Medial inside, lateral outside. It's probably on this picture. Yeah, here. You see, it's not as pointy on the outside, but it's still here. And the outside one right here is where the muscles that go on the upper side of the arm attach. So that's gonna, and they don't all attach there, but generally speaking, they do all attach there. Front muscle, medial epicondyle, back muscle, lateral epicondyle. And that'll be nice when we get to the muscles to kind of consolidate that. And then the last term there is, if you use your arm and you lean on your elbow, and you lean on your proper tip of the elbow, you're actually leaning right here, and that bone here is part of the ulna. So it's actually a forearm bone. And a forearm has two bones. One goes towards the pinky side, that's known as the ulna, and one goes to the thumb side, that's known as the radius. Ulna and radius. And so if you look at the ulna, it's very interesting from the side. The ulna looks like that. It's got this hook, like that. And the hook sits in and holds the humerus, like hooks into the humerus. And it sits into that thing. So that's pretty cool. That's why you can't go further than 90 degrees. If I go, I mean a little bit maybe if I'm flexing. But if I go too far, I'm going to break this puppy. I don't want to do that. And so that part of the ulna is known as the olecranon process, or the olecranon. So the tip of the elbow is the olecranon process. The who? No, because then on the humerus, when you look from the back, you got that indentation here in the back of the humerus where that process goes in, and that's the fossa. That's correct. So that's right. A fossa is an indentation. You got it right here too. We got the mandibular fossa on the temporal bone, and then we got the condyle sticking up. It could be called a process, but condyle is a more. Yeah, that one.
So that would be the fossa.
No, that's the process. The fossa.
Piece in between.
No, the fossa is back here where it sticks in. So the fossa is this piece. See, the fossa is this piece where the olecranon process fits in.
Oh, okay.
So it's on the humerus.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Oops, sorry. That's detailed, but that's kind of it's a really cool part of the anatomy. It's like, how the heck did this come up? You know, that we can't overstretch. It's probably for stability purpose. Who knows, right? I mean, you know, that if we could stretch it too much, we already have so much flexibility up here. Maybe that was sort of a stop measure that we can carry things, or, you know, that's sort of like evolution thinking. Why would the body do this? And then you always put gravity in. Everything is gravity based. Everything goes down as a force. That's why we're doing this postural analysis. If I walk around like that, it's much more work for my muscles with gravity going down than if I'm standing up straight and like that. Then the head can sort of balance on the check, on the shoulder. It doesn't have to be held up by it. So anyway, that's that. So then from there we go into the forearm. And the forearm, we already talked about the ulna. And then if you go down the ulna, the pinky side is the pinky side. You see how the ulna is pretty big on top and then skinny at the bottom? And then at the bottom they got these little things sticking up, and that's the styloid process. It's almost like you can take it and you can draw with it like it's a pen. And then, so they call that tip the styloid process. You got one on both bones. You got one on the ulna, on the ulna, and you got one on the radius. The radius is the bone that's sort of skinny on top and gets bigger on the bottom towards the wrist. And the outside is that little styloid process as well. So you have that there. And then together, that sort of makes this shallow sort of depression here that then holds the wrist bone. But on the radius, we have a couple extra points. We have the radial head, which is this round thing up here, right here. And so when we turn the forearm palm down, the radius moves over the ulna, and it crosses over. That's why the anatomical position is like that. So we can describe those bones parallel. And then, so the rotation of going that palm down happens up here. So that's what turns. And that's then what turns the wrist up and down. And so we have that head for that, then we have the neck, that's the shallow thing underneath, and then we got that tuberosity, and that's another tuberosity, generally bone muscle attachment. So that's a place where if we are palm down, we have a muscle from here that attaches in here, the biceps, which is this muscle that guys like to show off. And then when it contracts, we pull on that radial tuberosity to bring the palm upward. So that's sort of where that rotation happens. So that's kind of interesting. That's why I make you study that radial tuberosity thing. I know. All these parts. But maybe as long as you know why they're used, then maybe that will be easier to understand them. And then we basically, on the list, we have carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. When you look at the carpals, those are the wrist bones. We have 2 rows of carpals, and that's all I need you to know. I'm not going to make you study all the different ones. We know these are carpals, and this is the web of the hand, and these are metacarpals, or the palm of the hand, metacarpals. And then the fingers are the phalanges. And the interesting thing there is the thumb has 2 phalanges. One is called a phalanx, X, and phalanges is multiple. The thumb has 2, and every other finger has 3 of them, even the pinky finger. You see that the thumb just bends here, everybody else has 2 joints, bends in 2 places. So that's the big thing there. We go to the pelvis, and here's the pelvis. Ta-da! In the pelvis, we have a few parts that we want to know about. So the hip is sort of where we have the sacrum come down, and then it comes out to the side. So for once, the pelvis originally is made of 3 different bones. We got an ilium, that's the ilium, we can hold that here, right here. We got an ischium, we can hold the sit bone, that's right here where we should sit on properly. If we don't sit on our butt, and we sit upright, we sit on the sit bone. And then we got the front bone here, and that's the pubic bone. So everything labeled ilium or iliac, you know it's over here. Everything labeled ischium or ischial is in the sit bone area. And everything labeled pubis or something like that is in the front part, the arch that comes around. So that's sort of the framework, the setup. If I look at what I wanted to know about these, I wanted to know the iliac crest. That's this piece here. That's where the baby sits on. So then when you take the crest and you move forward, you get to this bump in the front. That's sort of prominent. If you bang it, it hurts. Don't bang into the wall with it. It hurts. Like here, it's pretty sharp. That's the anterior superior iliac spine. That's this piece right here. Right here. Anterior superior iliac spine. I call it the as-is. If you're a young parent, you may go to IKEA. They have the as-is section. A lot of treasures I found there. Cheap stuff. So as-is, anterior superior iliac spine. And then we go all the way to the back from the crest, go to the back. We reach the back big bump, and the back big bump is the posterior superior iliac spine. And then that makes a joint with the sacrum. That's why I want you to know that. So then this joint in here is known as the sacroiliac joint. When we look at joints, they often are, most of the time, they're named by the 2 bones that make the joint. Sacrum, ilium, sacroiliac joint. So that's something good to remember. We don't talk about too many joints, but if you see a joint, even if you see a ligament, the ligaments are usually named by the bones they attach to. And ligaments are, we talked about that this morning on Zoom, ligaments are rubber bands that connect bone to bone. Tendons are rubber bands that anchor muscle into bone. So ligaments is bone to bone, tendon is muscle to bone. That's good to remember that. All right, anyway, that's where we are with that. Then I want you to know the greater sciatic notch. See here, you go back, and then you go, and then it booms in. It goes right in there. That's the greater sciatic notch, where my finger is. So on the picture, again, the label went away somehow. That's right in here, greater sciatic notch. Sciatic nerve goes around there. Sciatic nerve comes out to the side, goes down the leg, causes a lot of leg pain. And a lot of the times, the sciatic nerve problem is either an intervertebral disc that's messed up, which we can talk about what we do when that happens. It doesn't have to be surgery, but that's sort of what we don't like. Or very often, the muscle that goes across here, the nerve goes straight through it. That muscle squeezes the nerve and hurts. And that's known as piriformis syndrome. If you've been in the field, you may not have heard of that. And we'll talk about more of that when we get to those muscles. Then we have the acetabulum. And the acetabulum is, if I look here from the side, that's right here. That's where the femur goes in. So if I have this other model, that's the acetabulum, where the head of the femur goes in. So that's good to know. And then the last two terms are the sit bone. And the sit bone is known as the ischial tuberosity. That's when we sit up straight, like, not like that, but sit up straight, we're supposed to sit on the sit bones. So one thing in the ergonomic evaluation that I pointed out, that I often tell my patients, put in a sitting wedge that's skinny in the front, a little thicker in the back, and if you sit in an angle, you kind of have to sit up straight. You cannot slouch anything. So that's the ischial tuberosity, the sit bone. And then the last one I want you to know there as a term is the pubic symphysis. And the pubic symphysis is in the front, when the two bones come together, the two pubic bones come together, they make a joint. And that joint is known as the pubic symphysis. So that's in the front here. That can cause a lot of pain. And then from there we have the femurs that start out. Femur is fairly straightforward. We got a round thing. What's that called? We got a thing after the head. What's that called? A neck. Good. And then we have, like in the humerus, we have these two bumps. Now here they're big. We have the big bump and a small bump. So we got the greater trochanter. That's the big bump. Right here. That's like if you hit this, but that's a lot of muscles going into it. As a matter of fact, all the muscles that go around the crest here, there's all these muscles, the glutes, they attach up here and they go into this side. So it's like a wheel that goes here that pulls on that femur in all different directions, so we can do all these different motions. So there's a lot happening right here. So that's the greater trochanter. And then on the inside, we got a small little skinny one. That's the lesser trochanter. And we'll talk about the muscles that go in there. So the muscles in the front go into the lesser trochanter, the hip flexors, the one that raise up the thigh. And so then the other term here I want you to know, proximally, is if you turn the thigh backwards, and in the back there is this roughage, this crest, and it's called the linea aspera. I don't know why they didn't make it. Linea aspera.
Aspera means rough in Spanish.
Aspera means rough?
Aspero.
There you
means
go.
rough.
Now I know. There you go.
Or Latin, whatever it came from.
Yeah, and that's well, Spanish is from Latin, so
Yeah.
so it's all that terminology. And that's a roughage because guess what we have? We have muscles attachments. So we got all the muscles in here that go to the inner thigh and bring the leg inward. That's all attached back there. Also the muscles, the quads, right? These muscles, these front muscles, these muscles, we don't think they're attached back there, but they're reaching back and are attached back there. And then they are so big, they reach the front and massively straighten up there. So Messi can kick the goal.
The quad, and what was the other muscle?
The adductors. Adductors. Anyway, that's the femur, trochanter, and then when we go distally towards the knee, it's nicely to be seen in the back here. You go towards the knee, you see these big things in the back. These big things in the back of the knee. Those are known as the condyles. Again, making a joint. A condyle makes a joint. We got one on the medial side, which is by the head, and we got one on the lateral side. Medial and lateral condyle. Right here. And then we, as a last term, we turn that thing upside down, and in the front we have this kneecap, the patella. Underneath the patella, we got this smoothness, and that's the patellar surface. So when we use the patella as part of the quadricep muscle to guide the quadricep in the right motion. Patella, and then from there we go further down distally, and we go to the tibia and the fibula. The tibia is the main bone going down, that then the weight goes into the ankle. And the ankle bones are known as tarsals. We'll get in that in a minute. So anyway, the tibia comes down and is the most weight-bearing bone. Actually, the weight goes all down the fibula. The fibula, this one is all bent. It's supposed to be straight. This is plastic. So the fibula is on the outside, and so it stabilizes the leg that we don't fall outward. So it helps the stabilization in here. All right? If you look at the tibia, we have two condyles, like one on the inside and one on the outside, medial and lateral. So now we have 4 terms. They're all the same word. 2 condyles up here, 2 condyles down here. Perfect. They make a joint. So that's where the terminology is kind of consistent. And then the other term here that I want you to know is the tibial tuberosity, which is the bump in the front of the knee that all the quads go in and anchor in. So all the quads come down and they anchor into this. So a lot of times teenage boys, they run like crazy and they sport and do all stuff. The muscle grows so fast and so massive, because all the testosterone and all that comes in. The bone, it pulls on the bone so hard it gets really painful in here. And they call that tibial tendinitis. Whenever you see the word itis at the end, I-T-I-S, it's an inflammation. So now you have tibial tuberosity is inflamed. It's the tendon that goes into the tibial. They call it tibial tendinitis. That's the terminology. Okay. And so I did some research because I had a patient who had it, or their son, and I found this physical therapist in New Zealand or Australia called Strickland. And she went to the Olympics and all that, so she was really good. And her methodology fixed the problem in 3 weeks, she said. I'm like, okay, let's read it. So I bought her book and I read it. And all that she really does is the muscles from here that go down here, they pull on that knee really hard, right? So all she does is say like, well, how about we stretch them out towards that place of pulling and make them a little longer and bring it down and teach the kid to take some olive oil and massage it down towards the knee a few times a day. Took away the tension down here enough that it decreased the problem. So there again, you have something where you can apply the anatomy logically. Then later on, I had a patient who had a problem here. Guess what I told her to do? Massage it down, make some space, give it some room so it doesn't pull as hard. It helped. So it's one of those that I found was very interesting. If you go further down, distally towards the ankle, we have on both bones, the tibia and the fibula, we have these bumps, and these are known as the malleolus, malleoli for plural. We have a medial malleolus on the tibia, and we have a lateral malleolus on the fibula. And then they sort of embrace the foot. You can sort of see it here, how they embrace the foot. These are the lateral malleolus, medial malleolus. So that kind of goes over and it embraces the talus and the talus bone. So down here, now these bones here are not called carpals like in the wrist. They're called tarsals with a T. So the ankle bones are tarsal bones. T-A-R-S-A-L. And I only make you study 2 of them. So the main one that the weight comes down, this one, and this is like a cube-shaped bone that's sort of in here, sits in here. The weight comes straight down, and the way that the joint surface is you can see it on these it mostly makes the foot be able to do this. So it's smooth on top. So look at that. So that's the tarsal. That's the talus, sorry. The talus. Where is that thing? Talus, here. See that? Talus. And then the other one that I want you to know is the one in the back, the heel bone. And that's known as the calcaneus. And the reason for that is if you twist your ankle, like many of us do, mostly we don't twist it this way. We twist it not this way, we twist it to the outside. And on the outside we got all these ligaments, and these ligaments get a little overstretched. Ligaments are like rubber bands. You stretch them real fast, they snap. You stretch them a little, hold them stretched, they can't go back quite all the way to the original length. And so that's kind of how they work. And so if we have a twisted ankle, we kind of get loosey in this thing. Have you noticed if you twist it once, you twist it again? Oh, I know. And one of the things that happens is the talus moves a little bit this way and gets stuck. You can visualize it. It gets stuck out there a little bit. And the calcaneus moves inward a little bit. So I see geriatric patients. On every single one of them, I pretty much can straighten out this talus a little bit with some, hammery type things I have, and then they can walk better. Pretty much every single time. Same with a lot of overweight. Overweight also moves this ankle out. I've had a lot of good results with obese people that when I work that, they can walk better for a few weeks. So that's why I want you to know that heel bone. Then we got a bunch of these small ones in here. And then we have the palm of the hand, the web of the foot. So then that's called the those are then called the metatarsals, not metacarpals, like in the hand. And then the phalanges are the same thing. The big toe has 2, everybody else has 3. Even the little toe has 3 phalanges. If you're very small bones. The smallest bones are the ones in the ear, the middle ear. But these are very small. All right, so that's it from what I have to say. Any questions? I know it's a lot of talking. A lot of tired eyes. Well, if no questions, then feel free to take a break. But I want us to go to the table for about a good half hour. And then we'll finish. You guys go through all the terms on the list with each other. I come around, you're going to ask me questions. And then we'll finish up with a little drill. How is that, you guys? Good, then let's do a drill. You ready? Take out a sheet of paper. Term number 1, write it down, do not speak it out. I'd like you to tell me on the hip, in the back, what is this big bump called in the back of the hip? That's number 1. The big bump in the back of the hip. The big bump in the back of the hip. What's that called? That's number 1. Number 2 is the sit bone. The hip part here in the back of in the bottom of the hip, right here where you're sitting on, that's the sit bone. What is the technical term for that? Sit bone, that's number 2. Number 3, we're going into the femur, and I want you to tell me what's the big bump on the outside of the femur on top. What's that big bump called? That's number 3. The big bump on the outside of the femur. Number 4, we turn the femur around and look in the back. There's a roughage in the back of the femur. What's that line called? And then number 5, we're going to the tibia. When you kneel down, you're really kneeling on this point right here. This bump in the front of the tibia. What's that bump called in the front of the tibia? And then we go to the arm after that. Number 6. I know we're going backwards. I want you to tell me on the shoulder blade, the scapula, what's this ridge called here? The back of the scapula, this ridge. What is that called? The ridge at the back of the scapula. That's number 6. And then if I go and take that ridge all the way to the end, and I'm going to the tip of my shoulder, what's that flat piece called here on the shoulder blade? It's another term. So the ridge all the way out to the tip of the shoulder blade, what's that called here? Number 8, and I want you to tell me, in the back of the humerus by the elbow, we got this indentation where that ulna sits in. We talked about that. What's that indentation called? Number 9 is, if I look at the forearm, I'm looking at the bone that goes to the thumb. And that bone has a few bumps here by the elbow. It's got this first thing, then it's got an arrow, then it's got a bump. What's this bump called? Here, at the elbow in the forearm bone that goes to the thumb. There's a bump. What's that bump called? That's number 9. Good job. Now I don't remember. You have to tell me. Number 1? What was number 1?
Posterior superior iliac spine.
Posterior superior iliac spine. Number 2. What was number 2?
Ischial tuberosity.
Ischial tuberosity. Very good. Number 3?
Greater trochanter.
Greater trochanter. Now I'm forgetting. Number 3, the greater trochanter, right out here in the femur. Number 4,
Linea aspera.
if I turn it around in the back, that line, that roughage where a lot of muscle attached, linea aspera. And then number 5,
Tibial tuberosity.
the tip of the front of the tibia, tibial tuberosity. Very good. Tibial tuberosity. And then number 6, spine of the scapula. Here you reach back, that's that ridge, spine of the scapula. We take that to the outside. What's that? Acromion process or acromion. Very good. And then I think we did the back of the elbow here and the distal humerus. Back in here. What's that called?
The olecranon fossa.
Olecranon fossa. Very good. And then lastly, but not least, the bump on the radius goes to the thumb. What's that bump?
Radial tuberosity.
Radial tuberosity. Good job, you guys. Excellent. See, that wasn't that bad. Now you're all experts in these terms. Does that help when we go through them? Good. To finish up, I wanted to have a look up here. As we get to the muscles, I do have, these are all the videos, but I have these pro study tips. And I have every muscle, or pretty much every muscle. I got cadaver videos for it. So I clipped all these different muscles. I'll show you one. That's on a cadaver, and some guy, boring voice, British accent talked about it. It's very therapeutic, like the British accent is. Oh, we can't get in there. Oh, never mind. But if you go here, you get some videos of cadaver clips. Sometimes it's really helpful to visualize these muscles, because now we get into muscles. So click on here under the videos. This is under the trunk muscle videos, or all the muscle videos is this. And then this here is a picture, is a PDF that goes to pages where you can print out, and every picture has a little muscle, so you can make flashcards if you like flashcards. So that's cool for that. And then this down here is my favorite. These are my favorite muscles. Doesn't open. Except, let's see if it opens. Continue on the website. Look at that. This is a picture I made for myself, and it's an electronic picture because you can squeeze in and say like, oh look, these are all the little muscles in the back. And you see all the attachments. So this is a reference picture that I created for my own self. There's more muscles than we do, but it's kind of helpful to see all of them at once. You see, then it's overwhelming, but you see it's finite. It's not the end of the universe. And of course, there's always more, but this is really covering. Clinically, if I work on any of these, that's what I do clinically, not more than that.
You said these are study tips? Videos?
Yeah, this is under the videos, the videos for the muscles.
Is that pretty?
Under the pro study tips, these are the links that I put there. So,
Which one you said it was printable?
which one?
To print? Is that printable?
Yeah, this is
flashcards,
pretty
you
printable.
said?
Well, this is too small to print. I put it on an electronic phone or so. But this is nice to print out a PDF and then you cut it out, make flashcards, or color it on the page and just learn that way.
Okay.
Because it shows you all the muscle individual. And then this is great because it's cadaver video. So it shows in the body but you don't see the face or anything. You just see bones and tendon. Just watch one and see if you can take it. It's not for everyone, but if you can take it, it's a very helpful way to visualize muscles in multiple different formats.
Are